Oh, do you want me to go ask him before we?
Good evening. Call to order. The Berkeley Heights Board of Education is holding a special meeting today, Monday, November 3rd, 2025, in the Governor Livingston High School cafeteria. The meeting was called to order by the board president at 6:01 p.m. Meeting notice statement. Adequate notice of this special meeting of the Berkeley Heights Board of Education was given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act as follows. Notice of this special Board of Education meeting was sent to the Star Ledger and the Courier News on October 28, 2025, and was provided to all schools, PTO presidents, and BHEA president, and posted at the administration building. A copy was also provided to the public library and filed with the municipal clerk. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, may I have a roll call?
Yes. Ms. Akiri, Ms. Bradford,
Here.
Mr. Dillon, Dr. Forger, Mrs. Jolly,
Present.
Mrs. Khanna, Mrs. Stanley,
Here.
Mrs. Torero.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We have two presentations this evening. Our first training and discussion on harassment, intimidation, and bullying and law procedures and code of conduct is going to be presented by Mr. David L. Disler, Berkeley Heights Board of Education attorney. Mr. Disler will provide training session on law and procedures involving HIB, and the board members will discuss the code of conduct and the legal pillars that affirm harassment, intimidation, and bullying in a school district. Mr. Disler, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Pretty broke. See if this works. Okay, it does. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I don't like signing behind a podium. So thank you again for inviting me to do your HIB training. I greatly appreciate it. This training will be a little different than most of your trainings because I require lots of class participation, as you will see. So we're going to get through a lot of work here. So again, this is on HIB. So we'll start off with some of the basics. We'll go through what is the three parts of the definition. We'll ask lots of different questions on what that looks like and what each of those elements. I'll say for it to be HIB, you have to meet all three elements. So if you meet two but don't meet the third, but two are really strongly in favor, it's not a HIB. So you need all three of that. And then we'll go through what the process looks like, both for you as a board, but also obviously your community and your parents, because I think that's important for them to understand as well. So we start out. Where am I pointing this? Nope, did I break it? Nope, yep, there we go, just a delay. So definition of HIB, we're gonna go through, as I mentioned, the three components. What is HIB? So part one, you need one of these. You need a gesture, written, verbal, or physical act, or electronic communication. The one thing I will say about this is you almost always have the first element. It's hard not to have a gesture, written, verbal, physical act, or electronic communication. With that said, let's see an example. Is this HIB?
You're out! Doyle rules!
Doyle rules!
Oh,
Doyle rules!
Thanks a lot, O'Doyle. Nice meeting you. Thanks a lot, fellas. You're saving my life.
O'Doyle rules.
Okay, does everyone know the movie? Okay, I'm seeing yes. Yeah. So did this meet the first part? So we're going to do lots of thumbs up, thumbs down during this presentation. So thumbs up if you think this met the definition, the first part of the definition, act, right? So I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay. So yes, this clearly met it, but the question is this HIB, right? So clearly there was an act, not a very nice one, made Adam Sandler less than unhappy, but not that unhappy. So we have to go on to the second part of the definition, and the second and third is where we're going to spend most of our time. If it was just that amount of time, I'd be done in about 3 minutes. But this is really where we see a lot. So whether it be a single act or series of incidents that is reasonably perceived as being motivated by actual or perceived characteristic. So two parts here, could be one act that's very extreme, or it could be a series of small acts, right? The small paper cuts that lead to a bigger impact. And then actual or perceived characteristics. So there's a case where a student was not gay, but they called him gay. They perceived to be that way. Even though the student ended up not being gay, they still found that because of the perceived characteristic, you don't actually have to be the underlying. We'll see that with racial terms as well. Well, you'll see students use a certain racial characteristic against a student. They turn out not to be that underlying race. It still does not matter. And then where we seem to really hit this is, so you have these were pulled from the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination. So race, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, and the like. Where most of the cases kind of talk about is this other distinguishing characteristic. So I think we know race when we see it, we know religion when we see it, but it's this other distinguishing characteristic that kind of trip up boards and districts and the like. So do we think, right? So we saw our characteristics here. It is clearly not race, religion, ancestry. I don't think that's what's meant by color for obvious reasons. National origin, gender. So it doesn't fit into 1 through 9, right? But then it falls under other distinguishing characteristic. And do we think so? Yes or no? Right? So very clearly, this would be an other distinguishing characteristic. A red nose, right? You can think of how that relates to students in the building. Clearly an other distinguishing characteristic. So let's play the game again. So yes, other distinguishing characteristic. Thumbs down, no. We're going to go through a bunch of examples here. These are based on real cases that I put in very small font so no one could see it in the bottom right. So here we have a 7th grade student called another student Fat, Fat A, and a horse. Do we think that's another distinguishing characteristic? Yes, we do. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate that. Yes. So clearly this, that would clearly be a distinguishing characteristic, making fun of a student's weight and a physical appearance. This was an interesting case that came out, give or take, a little under 10 years ago. So a group of 6th grade students were teasing another 6th grade student for being a vegetarian. Vegetarians are idiots. It's not good to eat. It's not good to not eat meat. People who eat meat are smarter and have bigger brains. So this case was watched pretty closely at the time, right? Could you think of a vegetarian? That doesn't seem like, is it, is not? So what do we think? Yeah, so again, 10 years ago, the HIB law, different than how we think of today. I see you all went thumbs up, but yes. Yep, thanks Chuck Norris. So we appreciate the thumbs up. So very clearly, now, right, we now notice that falls on the other distinguishing characteristic. Why do we know that? Again, at the time, 10 years ago, it had more of a narrow view. The case law since this time has determined that really that other distinguishing character is meant to be interpreted broadly. So again, even someone like a vegetarian could fall under it. Okay. Here we have a brand new case. This past year, a student used the word garbage near another student, but that student is known to be sensitive to that term. What makes this case interesting? The student responded negatively when certain boys used the word garbage, but not when others said it. I know, harder, newer case. What do we think?
No. I'm gonna say it depends on 3, but. I'm gonna say no.
Again, I mean, mixed. Yeah, that's the first one I feel like I stumped you guys a little bit.
Yeah.
So no, they said that basically the alleged victim can't get to choose what the other distinguishing characteristic is. So because some students said it, but others did not, they said, well, that's not really what we think of other distinguishing characteristic. In addition, the idea that you were just saying it near the person, but not at them, again, clear code of conduct violation, but not meant as a HIB. So the idea that someone is sensitive to a term is not an other distinguishing characteristic. So 2 interesting points from that case. Okay, a little bit older of a case, probably a little easier for that reason. So here we have 2 high school students concerned, and I always call this the concerned friend case because this kind of blew everyone's mind at the time. So 2 high school students were concerned that a friend might have an eating disorder. They called another student anorexic and then texted the student's boyfriend a statement that she was anorexic from the student's iPad. So here we have 2 concerned friends. They think their friend has an eating disorder. They then text the boyfriend saying she's anorexic. What do we think? Other distinguishing characteristic? Next here. So again, one of those cases that blew everyone's mind at the time. The commissioner went ahead and found another distinguishing characteristic because they said they met the criteria of, they went through the test, there was an act, the text of the boyfriend, there was another distinguishing characteristic called her anorexic, and the harm to the student was substantial. She became very upset that her friends called her that. But again, this was well-intentioned, which kind of threw everyone off their game a little bit because the commissioner took a very strict reading. Intent, this case also stands for intent doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if you intended to hurt the person here. Again, do I think this case may come out differently if it was decided today? Possibly, because we'll talk about that impact and the like a little later, mutual conflict, things like that a little bit later. Oh, I love this case. I call this the terrible singer case because it represents me in music class back in the day. So here we have two students who just don't get along. They hate each other, they don't get along. During music class, while one of the students was singing a solo, the other student said, cover his ears. I'm going to need earplugs, get through this part of the concert. Do we have another distinguishing characteristic? Yeah, so intent may not matter, but motive kind of does. So here, again, this is the mutual conflict that we're going to talk about a little later. So mutual conflict here, both students hated each other. That's the key part. They both didn't get along. And sometimes, unfortunately, kids are mean to be mean. And he was not saying those things to attack the kid for being a terrible singer. He was saying them because he didn't like the kid. So there wasn't another distinguished characteristic because he wasn't saying them because he's a bad singer. He was saying them because he just didn't like him. Interesting case. Oh yeah, I forgot to do the graphic. Sorry about that. Yep. Thanks, Kevin. Oh. Okay, let's talk about some teachers. A teacher commented that a student's skirt was too short in violation of the dress code policy. Another tough case here. Is this a code of conduct violation? Teacher goes and comments a student's shirt was too short in violation of the dress code policy. What do we think?
Code of conduct?
Yeah.
So is this a distinguishing characteristic? Would this fall under gender? Is the question, right?
No.
Because it's just making a comment about a female student's appearance. That is the question. Okay. There is. Sheldon, thank you very much. So no, I think we all breathe a little easier after this case. Again, one of those closely watched cases, because we talked about the previous one. Sometimes the commissioner will take a very strict reading and think, well, we're wondering in this case, is this gender, right? Would this be a gender hit the characteristic? And so here, point one, as we know, charges can be brought against a teacher. Sometimes teachers think that you can have a teacher on teacher hib. That's incorrect. So it has to be, the alleged victim has to be a student. So a student can't commit a hib against a teacher. A teacher can't commit a hib against another teacher, but a teacher can commit a hib against another student. And there's due process that follows that. So in this court's view, it amounts to nothing more than a teacher disciplining a student for violation of the school rules. So what we say here, as long as a teacher is following your code of conduct, there won't be a hib. If they go beyond your code of conduct, we might be looking at a hib. So let's talk about teacher number 2. Yes.
So
Yeah.
a student cannot file a teacher cannot file a hib against a student for
Correct. Yeah.
intimidating them.
Correct. That is that's a code of conduct, but the anti-bullying bill of rights doesn't protect teachers.
Okay. So
Uh,
really only protecting the student.
Correct. So let's talk about, and I should say teacher, that's usually on affirmative action is what we handle it under. So teacher comment number 2. So after becoming incredibly frustrated with a student, a teacher tells a student she is a bad child and she would, quote, take her earrings off and beat her. What do you think?
That's
Right.
tough.
Getting some mixed here. Oh, amazingly, I guess Adam Sandler's pro beating of, I'm not going to go there with that joke. So was found not to be hib. So clearly inappropriate. Charges filed against the teacher's cert, disciplinary charges and tenure charges brought against the teacher. Again, tough case, 2025 case, brand new. But they said just claiming, again, what was the characteristic here? A student calling them a bad child, bad student. Again, no really distinguishing characteristic, right? A student acting inappropriate, calling them bad. And obviously, then taking her earrings off to, quote, beat her. It's a terrible fact, but not hib related, right? So that's the key here. It wasn't hib related. Again, doesn't mean that this teacher didn't lose their job. Doesn't mean tenure charges and charges against their cert weren't taken. It just wasn't a hib. Okay, so now let us talk about the third component of the definition of hib. So it takes place on school's property or at a school-sponsored event or off school grounds. So that's as we know, again, the definition is very broad. It does not have to take place in the school building. It takes place extracurricular. It can take place on social media, or it can take place simply in someone's home. But there has to be that nexus to the school, right? So if it's not in our building, it certainly has to have an impact in the building. So where we've seen the HIB law evolve is this component. So if you look at all the early HIB cases, they were on that second component. They were, is this another distinguishing characteristic? And for the most part, what the commissioner did is they took a broader and broader and broader view. We are now seeing some of the recent cases come in, really talking about this third component. Was there a substantial disruption? And those cases, we're actually seeing the commissioner roll back a little and say, you know, early on, boards were so focused on prong 2 that they didn't really look at prong 3. If there was any impact, they were finding a HIB. Now the cases, what we're seeing is we're really focused on, is there that, quote, substantial disruption? And so we're going to have lots of fun examples on that. So substantial disruption, here we go, threshold requirement and differentiating HIB from your typical age-appropriate student conflict, which may be relatively minor in nature, and in some cases clearly forgiven by the student involved. So that last sentence, I think, is the big one. So is it minor? And quote, is it quickly forgiven by the students, right? We know there's constant conflict in our building, specifically the middle school, where there's even more than constant conflict. And so there's lots of little incidents, right? And some of those will meet the second definition. The question is then, do the students quickly forgive each other and move on, or is there that more lasting impact? So again, lasting negative impact beyond that moment. So here we go, thumbs up, thumbs down. Lots of fun games with this. I can see everyone's really just enthused by this awesome game I came up with thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, we're gonna call this one the yellow shirt. So during school spirit week, a 6th grader wore a yellow shirt. Another student made a comment alluding to the student being Asian. Other distinguishing characteristic, easy one, race. On the bus, other students called the student know-it-all and wished harm. The student later reported, it ticked me off at the time, but it did not affect her learning. What do we think? So here we go. Again, we have, it's that last component of it. It ticked me off, but it didn't affect learning. So again, the commissioner looked at this and said, you know, clearly the other distinguishing characteristic, but it pissed her off, but it kind of moved on pretty quickly after that. And that's what you're looking for. Is it simply, quick bother and then you move on? Or is that larger lasting impact, right? The student went home crying in tears, didn't want to come into school the next day, asked to change class assignments, things like that. Go, really working that thumbs up, thumbs down graphic. Okay, group chat, great case, about a 1.5 years old. So here we have 7 middle schoolers. They used a 20-person Snapchat thread to mock a classmate's appearance, weight, and sexual orientation. Pretty clear. The target, though, was not part of this 20-person thread. The target later found out about it and feared retaliation and later dropped out of school. What do you think? So they weren't part of this is an interesting case, right? Because 20-person one, middle schoolers, but they weren't actually part of the thread. What do we think? Yeah, so let's go here. Thank you, Kramer. Here's what the commissioner said. Quote, a reasonable 8th grader, everyone can laugh because there is no such thing as a reasonable 8th grader. A reasonable 8th grade student would know that a comment would be physically and emotionally harming to the victim, and that using that language within a group of 25 students will get back to them. Conversation or shared information can be screenshot or camera shot. Information among middle school students can travel and usually does. Any parents of an 8th grade student, this is a great case to remind them that anything you say, even if the person is not around them, will be immediately spread to that person, and therefore it has the potential to be a HIB. So again, in this case, there was a substantial disruption. You know, a one-on-one chat that gets shared, maybe it's not so much, but a key component here was that someone should know when you're in a large group setting, if you say something negative, it's likely to get back to that person, and it's reasonable to assume that. Okay, so the second component of this is this mutual conflict, not HIB. So this is what we talk about a lot in these. Is it conflict or is it HIB? And this is, when I talk to HIB coordinators, this is kind of the one they seem to struggle with the most. It's very, very difficult. So I'm just going to kind of spend some time walking everyone through what that difference looks like. So a disagreement, argument, or other action between people when they want different things, but everyone is equal. is considered mutual conflict, right? Two kids are equal, they don't like each other, they say mean things. That is to consider conflict, not hib. So again, mutual agreement is a disagreement. The actual perceived power between the participants is relatively equal. So we have our traditional kind of bullying someone, right? This is where that traditional definition can come into play at times. So we always try to tell the parents there's a difference between traditional bullying and HIB because you have that other perceived characteristic component. And that's why we have our code of conduct that always applies, and HIB is kind of that extra layer. Here we have that actual perceived power between them is relatively equal. That is considered conflict. So again, fact sensitive, unlike HIB, during conflict, everyone's equally involved, mutual, lots of buzzwords there. So I'm going to kind of walk through this because this is just, it sounds basic and easy, but in practice, it's very complicated. So I'm just going to spend a few slides on it. So bullying involves one or more people committing a mean or violent act against another person. There is no mutual participation or engagement. And again, this is not always easy. Why is that? Because there are times where someone will say, there is a quote unquote traditional bully will say something mean, and that will lead to a reaction from the person. And then they will say something back. And that puts a lot of fact finding on your anti-bullying specialist to figure out, is this mutual or did the person just respond because they are fearful that that's kind of what they do? So again, simple in words, harder in practice. So again, one-side victimization, intent is to harm the other person both physically and emotionally. Again, you can't just, sometimes students just say mean things to say mean things. So conflict, again, it looks a lot like HIB. I'm going, sorry, this thing's flying on me. So again, conflict can look like HIB. Again, it can involve that name calling or threats, but typically they're kind of as a defense mechanism or reaction. So all because someone responded with something mean does not mean it's not HIB, right? If it's that defense mechanism when other kids are picking on them to just say something back, it can still be HIB. So again, what are you looking for? So here are kind of, I'm going to walk through the tests of what we like to tell. Here's what you're looking for. So again, involvement, mutual reciprocal, both parties are equally participate. HIB is typically one-sided. So again, we hear this power imbalance terminology. That's traditional HIB. The commissioner came out with some guidance a few years ago that said, no, power imbalance can still kind of apply and be part of your policy. So again, conflict involves people with similar degree of real or perceived power, whereas again, power imbalance. Again, a lot of this, we talk about like reliance on your administration. This is one of those, you kind of have to know, the people in the building will know it when they see it, right? The principal knows the students involved in a way that we certainly just can't. And so they will kind of, again, they're the ones who fact-finding wise can make these type of determinations. Again, responsibility, both parties responsible. HIB, individual committing the act is typically responsible for the initial wrongdoing. Again, intent, both parties intend to resolve problem through their opposing actions or behavior, or HIB is causing physical or emotional harm to the other. Okay, let's get to this case. So this is the case that kind of shook the area of this area that I just went through. Again, for years, we kind of, this power imbalance, mutual conflict was kind of pushed aside. None of this mattered. And then this case came out. And I kind of maybe hinted where this case is going based on what I just said, but I just want to emphasize this case because it was such a groundbreaking change in how we viewed HIB. So here we have Tom, John, Sue, and Laura are communicating, made up names, are communicating through a message app. The boys are calling each other the B word, HO, WHO, ... and definitely the C, another word I'm not going to say. The boys claim it's a prank, and the girls encourage the name calling to continue. John, a white boy, then calls Susie, an African-American girl, the N-word. Susie says that's racist, and Susie, being African-American and the N-word was just said at her by a white male, is immediately offended, and the conversation ends. Susie's grades did not drop, and she appeared non-phased after the incident. Is this HIB? You take a moment to read it. Like I said, this was kind of the case that changed everything. Not everything, but this kind of shook the educational community. So not HIB, as I pretty much hinted through that. So this is why it shook this word. There was kind of a general rule before this case came out that if a student used the N-word towards another student in a derogatory manner, that was an automatic HIB finding. Even after that case, this case came out, it took some time for districts to really appreciate and understand this case, right? How could it be that a student could use the N-word to another student and not be hip? It took a lot of time to kind of analyze this case. Now, again, this is where we always tell parents, and this is why parent training is important on HIB. That does not mean that it is appropriate and won't be disciplined. That's why we have our code of conduct. Our code of conduct is traditional, what we think of bullying and inappropriate behavior. So I tell, sometimes a HIB is not a code of conduct violation, and a code of conduct violation is not a HIB. I've had both situations. I've had situations where we had the best students in the school just make a what they considered an innocent joke on someone who they considered their close friend. And when the student was upset, the students immediately apologized. They acted exactly how you would want them to act. But the 3 characteristics were met and a HIB was found. The school immediately realized like the kids were friends. They was purely joking. Was it an inappropriate comment? Yes. Did they immediately apologize when they realized their friend was upset? They did, and found no code of conduct violation. Similar to this example on the adverse side, right? Clearly a code of conduct violation. There is no school that would find that behavior appropriate and that shouldn't be corrected immediately. But under the test, all the students were in this together. If you saw on the reason we give that all those terrible words that I put stars in front of, it was clear that all the students were using terrible words. They're all doing saying terrible things to each other. They were all equal per se, right? Some thought they were joking around, but they were all saying them. And so the idea here that, well, I can say something terrible to you, but it's not a distinguishing characteristic. But then if I say in response, I say something terrible back, but it is, that it's one is HIB and what is not. Before this case, people would said, yes, the answer to that question is yes. After this case, the New Jersey Appellate Division made clear that no, we're not going to find a HIB here. So I'm just now going to quickly spend a few minutes just walking through the HIB process. So we have now, since the law was amended in 2022, there's now a Form 338. I believe if you look on your website, you have an actual website that they go to, right? The form's filled out for them. So the state released a specific form that you're required to fill out, but your website allows them to automatically generate it. So they click a button, they fill out a survey, and it creates the form for them. So there's 2 separate forms, one for parents, one for school. The key for parents, guardians, it can be reported anonymously. For your school staff and you as a board member cannot report it anonymously. So step 1 is report. The way the process gets kicked off, report is received, school principal receives it. Again, I should mention on the second paragraph, you as a board member are statutorily required to report any HIB sightings, right? You as a parent, right? If you're not on the board, you see 2 students doing something inappropriate, you're not required to report it if you think it's a HIB, but as a board member, you are statutorily required to report anything that you view that you believe might be an HIB. Same thing with all your school employees. They are required now by law to report it. And this also really applies to third-party vendors. So anytime you contract with a third-party vendor, such as a contractor or the like, even sometimes that applies to like construction workers we've had where we put it into their contract that if someone is in this building as a contractor and they see a HIB, they're required to report it. So we should say that because it's allegations, right? They're just allegations at the time. That does not mean that your principal cannot take steps immediately. The idea here is even if they're allegations, we want to put in measures to protect the students involved. So anything that can do to ensure the student is the safety, healthy, and welfare of all parties involved. I should also mention, even though the HIB investigation is going on, that does not mean that your administration can't issue disciplinary action or your code of conduct, right? Because the HIB and code of conduct can be slightly different. And if the principal feels that they've found a code of conduct violation immediately, the HIB investigation may continue to see if the 3 prongs are met, but they can still do initial measures under HIB and discipline under code of conduct. So I'm going to walk you through now the steps, which I think this board has now down pat, but since this is public, I really want to, most parents don't. And I think this is important because I get so many questions from parents on the process. So step 1, right? So HIB is reported. You open the investigation. Step 1 is the principal informs the parents of the parties involved. So it can be verbal or written. Again, this is that initial report, right? So immediately, HIB is typically what takes place. I'm not going to quote what happens in your building, but typically, principal picks up the phone and calls the parents. In that call, typically, again, it could be written as well. Some districts have forms that they send out, but it's general. It's very, very general because it's very early on. So an alleged HIB had occurred, an investigation on its way, and you receive notice thereafter. Why is this so broad? And why is there very little, like, specifically, well, what is the allegation? Because that's what parents constantly push. What is the allegation? And I get principals ask me all the time, can I just tell them, right? You know, they're asking me, they really want to know, can we tell them? The answer is you can, but it's not recommended. And why? Because as soon as the parent knows, they have the ability to impede that investigation. We get a lot of times, well, can a parent just say, you don't get to speak to my child? The answer is no to that question, right? We have a statutory obligation to undergo a HIB investigation, and we want to make sure that investigation is done without any involvement that could in fact taint the investigation. Again, the idea here is to get down to the truth. I didn't talk about this at the beginning. Technically speaking, the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, if you really read the statutory history, is an anti-suicide law. It's sad but true. You know, unfortunately, since it's been passed, and it's been one of the most aggressive anti-bullying laws in the country. The suicide rate in New Jersey still has not really gone down. But I always tell people, when you think about this law, think about that, what the intended purpose is, and then that kind of gets what you think the legislature is doing here. Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, that's kind of, it helps you frame what they're doing. And so why, again, code of conduct violation, typically, traditionally for years, student A is disciplined, principal calls home and says, your child did X. When it's a HIB, they tend not to get that information because we're doing this investigation. So step 2, the investigation initiated within 1 school day. The investigation completed as soon as possible, but not later than 10 school days. The result of the investigator reported to the superintendent within 2 school days. So the key there is school days. So if it happens over the summer, if it happens like, you know, right at graduation, things like that, or, you know, in the graduation stands because they're graduated, you have to the following school years. But it is a very, very, very tight time frame. There are no exceptions per se, although the commissioner has held that procedural mistakes in a HIB do not overturn an entire HIB. So if for some reason your administration takes 12 days, the commissioner has said that, look, again, the intended purpose that I just discussed, the policy reasons behind this law are too great to just overturn HIBs on procedural grounds. So even if your administration makes a mistake, it's a little late, that's not grounds to overturn it. Yeah, you'll get, I should say that doesn't mean nothing takes place. The commissioner may still say something to the effect of, you know, in the HIB finding, the board did something wrong. The board should update its policies to make sure that you're complying with the law's requirements, but it will not overturn a HIB. That is not grounds to do so. So here's where things get very confusing. We have 2 board meetings, as we know, right? And this is what parents don't seem to understand, the whole process component to it. There's 2 board meetings, but then also a 10-day requirement. So I'll try to walk you through, and I'll talk to you about what really takes place. So board meeting number 1, superintendent reports the results to the board at the next scheduled meeting. But keep in mind, at this point, the parents do not know the results, right? The parents have not been informed of anything. That's what gets parents a little confused. How does the board know before me? Could I have appealed this beforehand? The answer is the board learns of it first before anyone else. After the first board meeting, so board meeting 1, parents are notified. It's only after the board meeting, the district notify the parents of the results of the investigation. There we go. So what is reported to the parents? So after board meeting number 1, within 5 school days, the district must give parents the following: the nature of the investigation, whether the district found evidence of HIB, the discipline was imposed or services provided, and the right to request a hearing before the board. That's what is statutorily required that you must do, right? And the key is the nature of the investigation. Again, you have some leeway there with what the district includes, but the other components are pretty strict. So it's only after that, board meeting number 1, then parents are notified, then you have board meeting number 2, and that's what comes before you. And this is where things get a little tricky. So at board meeting number 2, you have the right to affirm, reject, or modify the next scheduled board meeting. Easy enough. So what should be reported to the board? The simplest answer is enough information for you to make an informed decision. And again, this is where no appeal is filed. Even where no appeal is filed, you as a board have an oversight to make sure that a HIB did or did not occur. Why is that? Again, the real reason behind HIB, and when parents ask me what is HIB, if you know, I get this question all the time. What's the point of HIB if we have code of conduct? The purpose of HIB is because the legislature was concerned that too many of these were being swept under the rug. Again, think of the purpose behind it. It was an anti-suicide law. And so the legislature felt that too many were swept under the rug. And so they wanted you as a Board of Education to have some oversight over this. And so you as a board get enough information to make an informed decision. So you get information on services being provided, whether training was provided to these students or teachers if it was against a teacher. So again, kind of the remedy, the remedial actions. So a lot of boards get something like this. Sometimes you get the results, sometimes you get the report, but something to the effect of, again, the bullying allegation to student number was found to be substantial due to student number shouting the statements. Make a run at the border. Don't leave a trail of tacos behind. At student number 2, who is of Mexican descent. Disruption such as student laughing, whispering, and passing a note with a Mexican flag drawn on it, observed to have occurred afterwards, right? So you got enough information to understand were the components met. Here you have an act. Here you have a distinguishing characteristic, race and national origin. And again, disruption, students laughing. Here you may not have enough for the impact. But again, you should get enough information to make an informed decision on all 3 components. Okay. So again, you also get what discipline is imposed to make sure it's not being swept under the rug, and any other type of action being taken, right? So you get information on 2 components, right? Was it a HIB? Here are the facts that explain why or why it wasn't, and then what the district did. Here is the most confusing part of HIB. So again, we talked about the 2 meeting structure. You have meeting 1, you get it reported to you, parents are notified, then meeting 2. What makes this confusing is 2 components to this. Number 1 is they have 60 days. Now you as a board typically meet every 30 days or so. So normally it's best practice if within the 2 meetings the parent appeals it, because then you don't have to affirm, reject, or modify before the parent appeals. There are times though that obviously you must reject or modify before the parent decides to choose to appeal. So we've had that situation here, I know. So you have to revisit the appeal. It's a little awkward because you've already made a decision on it. Again, you do hear it new. What complicates it even more is obviously both parents have now received the result of that. And then if they appeal it and you overturn that decision, now a parent gets a different choice, a different letter that said basically, we know we affirmed it, but now we're overturning it. It's just a little awkward. But again, that's what the legislature has done, and we're bound by that. The second component of the law is within 10 days of the parent requesting, the board has to hold a hearing. I'll be frank. No one in the state complies with this. I'm just not aware of any board that holds special meetings for just a HIB hearing. It's very rare. In my personal opinion, I think it showed that the legislature, again, well-intentioned here, may not understand exactly how boards operate and that full boards would be hearing this. But again, that is in the statute. I'm required to share it, but again, it's typically not followed, just to be honest. So again, a HIB hearing, I know you're very familiar with this, so I'm not going to spend substantial time. It's an executive session. Again, the principal or the like, you typically have someone who's familiar with the facts, comes in, gives the information first. As you know, that's how I typically like to hear it. The key here is it's not a trial, right? There's no cross-examination. There's no witnesses being called. For the most part, it is a parent's opportunity to come in and explain their child's version of the story. They can provide documentation. They can explain what really took place here and why they think you shouldn't have HIB. Your role as a board, I always think, is 2 folds. So number 1, again, were the procedures followed, right? That's you as an oversight, right? Did the administration follow the proper procedures outlined in the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights? And then were the 3 components met based on the information before you? So then, again, after that second hearing or after the appeal, you're required to issue a written decision to affirm, reject, or modify, and that decision gets provided to the parents. So this is I'm going to end here with kind of a recent case that came out. So potential issues with overturning. So 1, obviously, that impacting your administration, but really the legal component of this is a potential issue of overturning. Again, this is a recent case that came out that I just want to highlight. So if you don't have a good enough basis, what happens when the commissioner gets to appealed? So this is a recent case here. So real case, and you can see why the board did what it did, and what the commissioner did what it did. So here we have, after school, a student followed a 9th grade girl, called her pretty, repeatedly asked her hugs, and asked to lift her backpack. She reported fear and avoidance from home. Right, so they were walking home together. Male student was behind a female student. called her pretty, asked for hugs, attempted to lift her backpack. She reported fear and avoidance of home. The male student classified, not entirely relevant for this, but part of the analysis being done. The HIB investigation concluded that the incident did not substantially affect the operation of the school or the rights of other students. They found that the student came back the next day. So I think understandably in this case, the board overturned the administration's decisions here. They found the student's action made the victim fearful of harm. The parents appealed it to the victim fearful of harm and the like. They found that the gender was the distinguishing characteristic. They had a full hearing, and an AOJ found that the board's decision was not arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable, and find the student's action made the victim fearful of harm. The commissioner reversed, and here's the important component for myself to explain to this board and why that case is relevant and what you have to do if you're going to overturn a decision. So the commissioner disagreed, rejecting the ALJ's conclusion that the board's HIB determination was not arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. So here's the key. The commissioner found that the board's decision failed to provide an explanation for why it disagreed or disregarded the findings contained in the investigative report or how the student's conduct met the statutory criteria. So what the commissioner has said is if you're going to overturn a HIB where your administration found it, or the inverse, if your administration doesn't find a HIB and you want to find a HIB, you have to be very crystal clear in that decision of why you not only are finding HIB, but you disagree with the investigator's findings. So an important case, again, relatively new, but it's, again, those cases that kind of shake what I do for a living are these type of cases, because we have always thought, okay, a board can overturn, no big deal. It's the board's ultimate decision. And the commissioner has said, no, it's going to be arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable unless you are crystal clear explaining why you disagree with that investigation report. So with that, does anyone have any questions? I know I went through a ton. Yes.
Just to kind of touch on what you just said.
Yeah.
So are you saying that when we're voting on HIBs
Mhm.
during, our agenda, and somebody wants to disagree, they're supposed to say why they disagree at that time?
No, so what I'm saying, oh, when you're voting, no. So you issue a decision to the parents in
So-
writing. So when someone appeals,
Mhm.
within 5 days thereafter, you have to issue them a written decision. What the commissioner is saying is if you're going to overturn that decision and it goes against the investigation report, you as a board are required to explain in that decision why you have reversed the administration's decision. Yep, Bill.
So I've seen a couple of these different. I've been through some of these training sessions and I always walk away with a different take. So I'm only going to ask you, right? We talked about specifically the board role. You said meeting one. In meeting one, right?
Yep.
Does the board have an action to take?
No, meeting one, you as a board are just informed that this exists.
Not on the agenda.
Not on the agenda, it's just in executive session, the superintendent will say, I want to give you a heads up, this case exists, here are the general facts, you'll be voting on it in your next meeting, therefore you have time between the two meetings to learn more.
Perfect. And I think that's it. Learn more. So meeting two, I then have an action to take.
You do.
I need to vote.
Mm-hmm.
I often find that the process doesn't allow for the board to know a lot of the details.
Yeah.
Right? So there's been conflict over the time as I've gone through various trainings as to what am I voting for in meeting two? Am I voting that it has been proven to me that the HIB specialist has gone through, followed all the right criteria, we followed all the necessary steps, and we're validating that the right protocol was followed? Or am I intended to have an opinion on the accuracy of the findings of that HIB specialist and the recommendation of the superintendent?
Typically the former, right? Because again, this is assuming no appeal, correct?
Prior to an appeal.
So prior to appeal, remember, you're going to get pretty limited information. You're not going to get any information about the student. You're going to get basically what is on the pen and paper in front of you. And so your responsibility at that time, in my opinion, is to review what is in front of you, right? The summary of what took place, the actions taken, and make a determination on what is in front of you. Did this meet the standard and the test? That, to me, that is different than when an appeal is filed and you get substantially more information, including obviously the individual who is going to come before you.
Because I think there's, if I sat through hearings and appeals, I think there's a common misperception by the public that second meeting when we're voting, we have almost like we're the jury and we've
Yeah.
had all the facts and we're saying, yeah, this is a hip, like, this based on my experience, this met, or my understanding, this met all three characteristics, and therefore I'm voting to affirm or reject the recommendation, right? That's not the case, right? In many instances, we as a board don't get those details unless an appeal occurs.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to get back to that one slide that had that one paragraph. You know, that's traditionally what you're looking at, right? It's not a substantial amount of information. It's enough because obviously, look,
And
again,
say
at
it
this
be-
stage,
and I say it only because it's only through the experience of the 6 years that you kind of get that.
Mhm.
Not, it doesn't jump off the page to you.
Yeah.
Right. And I also think as when you're dealing with parents that are going through this, that are obviously very emotional at the time, there's a misunderstanding about how much do you know. Right. And so I think that's
So-
important for the public to understand what our role is, especially in meeting two, what we've been shared, and really our reliance on the experts and the administration on following through and all of their investigation. And we're saying, yeah, so far, based on everything we've seen, it appears that all of the right boxes have been checked, the right procedure has been followed, and they've done their job to evaluate it based off of these rules.
I think there's a lot of perception issues with this law, to be honest with you. One of my least favorite is if you look at the actual law, it's really a reporting notification, right? It's a report notification to the board, which the board then reports facts to the Commissioner of Education, and it's a report to the public twice a year that your superintendent comes before you and shares the data.
Yep.
I wish it was not called HIB because I think the stigma associated with that, how can my child be a bully? I know my child. They are certainly not a bully. They made one bad choice and the stigma follows them.
Yeah.
I've had districts just change the name and say it's a policy violation of this because of the stigma associated with that. Because the reality is a lot of these incidents, if you just said they're a code of conduct violation, parents move on. But it's when they get that letter, and says a violation of the harassment, intimidation, or child committed an act of HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, I can understand why they're upset. And then they think there must be this due process because there's this law in place and what you as a board get is much more limited than obviously if there's an appeal and or if there's a full trial, which there is not in this setting.
I wanted to kind of add on what Bill was saying is it's hard for us to always know that the process was fully followed with the information that we have.
Mhm.
So we're basically depending on our districts for the most part with the data that they're giving us that they have followed it. Because I know we've had situations where it hasn't. So that's why I'm asking that question.
I understand that. Again, that's where it comes down to one, your role as a board, right? And I get you have an expanded role here, but similar to like the code of conduct, right?
Right.
You have to have faith in your administration that they'll follow it. And you have to have faith that if they're not, your superintendent will be ensuring that's followed. And then your feedback then is to the superintendent to say, look, I've heard X, Y, and Z. Can you please look into that to make it true? And then you have to have faith that your superintendent's going to do so.
And that is done after meeting one, before meeting two. That's when the board can talk to the superintendent about that procedure.
Yes, I mean, look, if there are general concerns that if you hear through the grapevine that, X, Y, and Z complains, you as a board under the school ethics have to have an obligation. You share that with the superintendent. Say, look, I heard this procedure wasn't followed for these reasons. And then it's on the superintendent to look in and examine that. If the board has any questions on an HIB, yes, yeah, that's correct. That's your opportunity between meeting 1 and 2 to ask those questions.
Not at meeting two.
Ideally not at meeting 2. My preference always is that board gets their questions in beforehand, just because it allows, again, I've been in a situation too, right? But I understand from the superintendent, your BA, it allows them time to prepare and get the information you need, because they're not the ones doing the investigation, you have to remember, right? They're getting similar information that you have. They're reviewing the report. They're doing so thoroughly, but there's always going to be questions that they need to go back and get more information. And obviously, if you can do that before the meeting so they can do that, you'll have the answer at the meeting.
And during the process, the investigation process, a letter goes to the victim and goes to the offender.
Mhm.
If there are witnesses, do parents of witnesses get a letter informing them that their student is a witness to something?
They don't. So no different than a code of conduct, right? We would interview their child, but they don't get notice of that.
Any other questions? Yes, Mrs. John.
So some of the things that I struggle with, right? So in the term govern like oversight, right?
Mhm.
In order to have oversight, you would think that you would want all the detail, not just some of the detail, because then how do I administer, oversight without having full information? And so that's why it's really, a struggle, right? So
is.
if my role is oversight, then why am I only getting partial information or not everything?
So you should have enough information in order to enact your role as a board member, right? So if you think, look, I looked through this, what you just presented to me, and I think X, Y, and Z, I'm concerned that X, Y, and Z wasn't followed. You have every right to go to the superintendent and say, I need more information on X, Y, and Z. Now, keep in mind that there are student privacy rights, so they don't want you to get everything because that kind of opens a can of worms. When I say everything, I mean like witness statements, the full investigation report for each one of these incidents. Again, appeals filed, that's different. But if for some reason you think, look, I reviewed this case, this one's not sitting with me right, and I have more questions, you certainly have every right to reach out to the superintendent and say, look, I can't do my obligation as a board member unless I get this information.
Okay, and so just to be clear, when we're voting, after the first meeting, it's based on procedures, right?
Second meeting.
Sorry, second meeting,
Yep.
that's right. It's based on whether we agree that all the procedures have been followed rather than do we agree with the finding itself?
No.
No.
So it's procedures plus was the three prongs of the test met. So
Okay,
you're gonna get you're gonna get not the full, the full investigation report, but you're gonna get information that says what happened here, what discipline was imposed, and again, it should have the three components. Was there an act? Always an act. Was there another distinguishing characteristic? What was that distinguishing characteristic? And was there an impact on this child? You should have that information in the information provided to you. Again, that may not be the witness statements, that might not be the full investigation report, but that information should be provided to you. So again, you can do your role as a board member, procedure followed, and where the three prongs met. And again, if you think after reading this, this one's not sitting with me right for X, Y, or Z reasons, that's when you should reach out to the superintendent to get more information.
So, I know over the last maybe 2 years, we've had to try to get our staff to really make sure they all kind of have a similar look to them, because I think anytime that anything, it looks a little different, it's like, oh, wait, this looks off, right?
Mhm.
And kind of getting that consistency. And I think they've been doing a good job in trying to get that consistency for us. Um, because I think when you look at the report, it is really hard, right? And you're looking for those three things, right? But I think my question is that most of the time, right? Like, we know that they can not only appeal to us, but the parents can appeal to the commissioner, correct? Right. So for me, I always feel like our staff has to be prepared to go in front of the commissioner
Yeah.
by the time they give us the report. Is that that's the concept, right?
I mean, I wouldn't put that much pressure on them, but I think, look, you want to always dot your I, cross your T's, not so much, in my opinion, because they should be fearful of going before the commissioner, but because these things matter, right? What they do matters in these investigations. And so they want to get it right, and they should make sure they take each one of these seriously, because the impact on the families, whichever way they decide, is real. And
Yeah.
so, look, if that day comes and we have to go before the commissioner and it gets sent to a hearing before an administrative law judge, we'll help prepare your staff. But having a report that is accurate, that has well thought out, that has witness statements that support that finding are extremely helpful. And a lot of these cases will be decided on the background information.
Yeah. My next question is, a lot of families really struggle with kind of what you were saying before, is that, well, my kid's a really good kid, so why do we have to do this HIB? Like, they didn't mean it or whatnot. But I think that the important thing is this is a reporting thing, right? Like, if
Mhm.
it fits the law, like, we're kind of obligated, correct? Like, there's no wiggle room, like, for us to be like, well, we don't think they meant it, or we think your kid's a good kid, like, right? Like that,
Yeah,
it's a law thing, right?
like I said, I think that's why I always give out the example I gave of one of the hardest cases I've ever had, where the kids were all close friends. They were all great students, no disciplinary issues, top of their class, AP classes across the board. And one of them was from a foreign country, and one of the students kind of mimicked them with the accent, right? All joking, because kids will do that all the time. But that really impacted the child,
Yeah.
and it met the three prongs. Again, they immediately apologized. All students felt awful for saying it. They immediately apologized, but the prongs were met. And, and so when the prongs are met, the prongs are met. And again, no discipline issued against the students, zero. I don't even think they found a code of conduct violation, but a parent appealed it. And they said, my child was really bothered by this. They don't want to be associated with these individuals, don't want to be around them. And the three prongs were met. So you have a statutory obligation to follow the three prongs.
Yeah.
And again, the reason is the commissioner wants to see those stats, and more importantly, the public gets to see them twice a year, and you want to make sure they're accurate.
Right. And then I think, right, to go along with that, like schools, because I think sometimes people think, well, that school, they let it go. They let the HIB go. This other school let it go. But that would be wrong, right? Because it's a reporting thing from the state, right? We're required to report these things. So I think, right, like sometimes parents have it in their head that we have more leeway, right? But we really don't. We have to kind of follow that law. And then my second part of that is like, let's say the three prongs were met
Mhm.
and our staff did their due diligence and it was overturned. What do you think would happen if it went to the commissioner in appeal? Like,
Again, so that's why I bring up the last case, right? So you as a board, since that case has come out, have now an obligation to be very specific on why you disagree with the administration. So you have every right to overturn the decision. And there have been decisions that I viewed that I agree with the board that, look, I think X, Y, and Z wasn't met here under the law. Again, I don't, no staff member came into their current teaching role so they can investigate bullying. I
Yeah.
think we have to remember that. It's really hard. And when you talk to your staff on this, it's very draining. And so every once in a while, one gets overturned, but I think your obligation now is to be clear on why. Why was it? The parent came in and they actually explained that X means Y, and that's not really a distinguishing characteristic. Or like the kids made up the next day and we don't think there's actually an impact here. The other parent came in and said, of course, yeah, they're best friends now. Something to that extent where maybe your staff didn't have the information and that you have now factual support to overturn it. But you have to be clear, because if you are not crystal clear explaining why you disagree, the commissioner has been clear that that's arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable.
can I just follow up on that?
Yeah.
So we've had maybe two cases, I think, since I've been on the board where we kind of sent it back to the administration,
Mhm.
like to do more investigation. Like, is this correct? Like, what was there a
Yeah.
right, like thing? So how do we go about that? And is that better than just immediately overturning it?
So great question. I'm going to give you the legal and the practical answer.
Okay.
Legally, because again, this is a pretty rigid law, there is no real legal mechanism to do what you just said. Now, we've had, I don't want not to really reveal any confidence in executive session, but I've obviously recommended that course of action. Because in my view, if you feel you don't have enough information as a board, you're not sure one way or the other, and you feel, look, how can we overturn a HIB because we don't have enough information? Or how do we affirm a HIB if we don't have enough information? Again, the commissioner has been crystal clear on one thing. It is that we will not overturn HIBs on just purely procedural grounds. We may yell at the board for not following the proper procedures, but we'll not overturn a HIB. And just my personal view is that I'd rather a board be yelled at for procedural grounds than get a HIB wrong. And so again, is there in the statute, you can read it, there's no real mechanism to do what you've said and I've recommended. But I'd rather personally go before the commissioner and say, yeah, we know that procedurally what we did may not be right, but we got the HIB right, rather than go before the commissioner and say, yeah, we overturned it, but we weren't entirely sure why because we didn't have enough facts here.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think
Yep.
I learned a lot tonight.
I just wanted to say, I think for the public, the term HIB is really confusing
It-
because
Agreed.
you think your child's getting bullied at school, but it might not fall under those characteristics. And the expectation is that's a HIB that should be founded. And so I don't know if it's something that we as a board should discuss, maybe changing the actual term itself, because it's very misleading. It
So
really is.
You can't change the terminology per se. Again, the districts that have struggled with it sometimes will say like a policy violation of this policy. and again, that's an individual determination of how you want to do it. But I will agree that education on this is so important.
Yeah.
Because again, it is really scary as a parent when they get these. I've spoken to many parents before a HIB appeal, and they think they know until I go and kind of explain it all to them, and you could see like a light bulb go on because they felt like they were in the dark. Because again, I can understand, right? You get this letter. First, you get a call from the principal, but it says that I really can't tell you much, and that's a little different. And then they say, but don't worry, we're going to be investigating this. Okay, well, my child's 12. He's not used to being investigated and being called in with witnesses. And then they get a letter that says either a finding or no finding related to harassment, intimidation, or bullying. So I think the more parents know, the better. Because again, we've had the code of conduct for years, and we don't discipline under HIB. You can't there's nothing in the statute that allows you to discipline anyone under HIB. Sometimes you find no HIB and students suspended for 10 days. Sometimes you find HIB and there's zero disciplinary action. We only discipline under the code of conduct. And so again, the more parents know, the better, because there is a lot of confusion around this.
And I guess I question how we educate them better, because I mean, I've heard parents say before to me, my child was bullied, but there was no HIB, and I don't understand that. And so I think from a community perspective, there needs to be a better understanding, and I don't know how we do that. I mean, I just think it's very difficult because the expectations are, oh, well, it's bullying, it has to be HIB.
It's tough.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I've had districts do lots of parent training, and it's getting parents to show up when their child hasn't committed a HIB is the toughest component. I'm sure your administration will relay that that's kind of the getting the buy-in part, but it is important because a lot of people don't fully understand this law.
Mr. Gisler, what happens to that letter when it goes to the student file?
It stays, by statute, it stays in the file. It doesn't, again, like, I think there's common misconception if my child got an HIB in elementary school, that when they apply to colleges 10 years later or however many years later, that the college will see that. Typically, again, it's just a letter that stays in their student file. Obviously, if discipline is opposed in high school, the colleges will see the disciplinary record, right? Whatever information related to student discipline is sent to colleges, they'll see that. But I don't think colleges typically see the letter, is my understanding, but that your administration clarified. But there is a letter by law, that's that 2022 amendment, that now districts are required to place the letter or place something in the file. And our recommendation typically has been that letter that you send to them gets placed in the student file. So there is some record of it.
So some of the other concerns that we hear a lot and things that bother us as well with this law is the fact that it applies to kids in first grade and
Yeah.
second grade. And is there maybe somewhere in the legal circles any thought to potentially putting an age limit on this? Because when you're like, how is someone harassed? Like when you're when you're in first grade, how does that, how do the kids even know what they're saying or what they're doing? And yet, you meet the three prongs, but there's so little. Is there anything in the legal circles that is potentially floating around to address an age?
Not that I'm aware of. I can say from a practical experience, my experience, and this is not law, is that they typically are a little more lenient in the elementary school levels, just generally statewide. That doesn't mean that's here or anywhere else. They just tend to be more lenient because for the reasons that you just expressed. Legally speaking, though, it does apply. Districts are trying to get more creative when it comes to my child in third grade got a HIB. Does that really apply to them when they're in high school? And we can talk at a different time of what districts are doing in that regard. But as an actual age cap, like this shouldn't apply to kindergartners. I'm not aware of any proposed legislation right now on that.
Sorry, and when you say they, who do you mean that you say they are trying to be, they're more lenient?
My experience is that sometimes when applied, the principals and the like tend to be a little more lenient with elementary schools. They tend to give them a little more leeway, but there is nothing in the law theoretically, well, not theoretically, there's nothing in the law that it does apply differently. I can only tell you in practice, I have seen that. That doesn't mean that's here, doesn't mean it's everywhere, or but that's what I have seen generally speaking, because I think the concerns you raise are, a lot of people share that concern as applies to the lower school students. Now, I will say, on the flip side of that, when people raise that argument, people will argue on the other side, something to the effect of, no, 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 look, if you look at the statistics, there's a lot of emotional impact on students even that young, so we need to apply the law. But again, if you're asking for practice, that's what I've seen.
Thank you, Mr. Disler. We appreciate you coming here tonight and giving us and our public some information, very
No.
valuable information.
Thank you very
Thank
much. I appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you. We're moving on now.
Well, can I just interrupt you?
Sure.
So, unfortunately, we are missing 3 board members tonight, which means that I have to leave early. I have 13 middle school girls that I coach for PAL, and they have their last game tonight. We are going to run out of a quorum when I leave. The
At
only
8 o'clock?
concern is public comment is at the end. And if I'm not here, you have no public comment.
So you're asking to move the public comment to now?
Before, yeah, real quick.
Okay. Is there any objection from board members? I'm sorry?
Do we want a motion to move it? Is what she asked.
Move. Okay.
So I'll make an emotion
Yep.
to move public comment to now prior to the training.
Okay, do we, second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, at this time, we're going to move to comments from the public. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic. The board requests that the individual state their name, town of residence, or school of attendance for the record. The specific action items they are commenting on and ask that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters or regarding are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by the members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any members of the public become disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statements. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. We will take comments in person first and then comments online. Is there anybody in person who would like to make a comment? I see no individuals in person. Is there anyone online? No, I see no individuals online. So may I have a motion to adjourn our public comments?
So move.
Second.
Mrs. Stanley and Mr. Dillon, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, voice vote. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Disler. Okay, review of board self-evaluation, summary report, and development of 2025 board goals, presented by Mrs. Jean Cleary, the NJSBA field representative for Berkeley Heights Board of Education. Thank you, Mrs. Cleary.
Hi, it's good to be with everyone again. I have reviewed your board self-evaluation and provided a summary document. I am going to, before that, just start and ask Mrs. Bradford to pass out the Berkeley Heights Public Schools mission statement. And the reason I'm asking her to start there is before we want to set the tone for what we're going to talk about tonight. All of the work of the board should really begin with an understanding of what your mission statement is. Your mission statement reflects the aspirations that your community has for the students who pass through the Berkeley Heights schools, okay? So for the benefit of the public, the Berkeley Heights Public Schools mission statement is that the mission of the Berkeley Heights School District, a community partnership that values the direct relationship between exceptional education and individual success, is to challenge students to explore, to excel, and to embrace a lifetime of learning by developing a staff devoted to excellence, applying resources effectively, fostering a culture of mutual respect and integrity, and offering engaging academic curricula and diverse co-curricular programs. So the reason that's important is it's really the foundation of the work that the board needs to do, right? So we talk a lot about the board being a policy-making body, planners, appraisers, And we want to filter that through helping your students achieve the aspirations, the goals that are in the mission statement. So the next thing I'm going to ask to be just passed around is the Code of Ethics. And I know I've been in the past to present Code of Ethics, so this is not a surprise to you, but it's one sheet to just remind us again of the requirements of your governance and the Code of Ethics that you need to be in compliance with, okay? And on the sheet, we see that it talks about the function of upholding and enforcing all laws, rules and regulations of the state, right? Making decisions in terms of the educational welfare for all students, confining your action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and helping to frame those policies and plans only after you've consulted with those who will be affected by them. D goes on to talk about the responsibility not to administer the schools, but to see that they are well run. And it's interesting listening to the HIB presentation, which was very good. I myself, as an administrator, used to have a part to play in that, putting those reports together for the board. It really isn't so different with HIB, right? It's remembering that you're not administering the schools, but you're looking to see that there are proper procedures in place and policies that guide the district, right? That's how you communicate with the administration for helping you to achieve those aspirational goals of your mission statement. So it goes on to talk about, not surrendering your independent judgment, to holding matters confidential until they are prepared for being shared with the public. And that happens through what goes on your agenda so that we have meetings that are well-run, that can be informative business meetings for the benefit of the community and keep the community engaged in the good work that's happening in the schools. Voting on the best qualified personnel after recommendation of your superintendent, and referring all complaints through the chain of command, right? So now we've taken a look at the mission statement and a reminder of the Code of Ethics that really outlines the responsibilities of your governance, okay? Now we get to why we came here, for the board self-evaluation. First, I just want to say that the board self-evaluation, so that the public is aware. Yes, you can go. Thank you so much. Mrs. Bradford's doing all the running around for me tonight. Thank you. For the benefit of the public to understand that the board is required under statute to do an evaluation of the superintendent to ensure that the district is well run, right? You aren't required under statute to do a board self-evaluation. So the community should really applaud the fact that you have participated in this process, because this process of board self-evaluation is you saying clearly that you want to examine those things that are going well in your governance and identify the areas that you see challenges and opportunities in to improve your governance in service of students, right? So doing the board self-evaluation is a great first step and should be recognized as such. So when we look at this, what's in front of you is a summary report that I created in the hopes of actually helping the discussion we're going to have tonight about goal setting. And the board has gone through and completed the self-evaluation, which speaks to these areas. It asks you about how you think you're doing with vision, mission, and goals, policy, accountability for student achievement, governance, team relationships and accountability, resource management and oversight, and community leadership. So it was completed by 7 of 8 board members and the superintendent. And on a 4.0 scale, the average board evaluation score of all of those areas averaged out is 2.1 on a 4.0 scale, okay? So one of the things I want to caution is when we look at low ratings, right? Of course, we have a tendency to focus on those numbers, but we really want to look at what those numbers reflect and what we can do to make sure that we're focusing our attention on the things where our attention needs to be focused to show the best outcomes, right? So the first one, board mission, vision, mission, and goals, the board rated itself at 1.6 on a 4-point scale. on the evaluation, it talks about, this is what's posed on the evaluation that you rated yourself against. The board being committed to a shared vision of our district's future, its mission and goals to move the district forward so that you're focused on student achievement, guide the district strategies, and reflect community values, okay? So I'm just noting here that from what I was seeing, and the raw data of the compilation has it been distributed yet or?
No.
No, okay. It will be distributed with you so that you can have the raw data and see, if you're in agreement with these. But it was pretty clear to me when I looked at it that there's agreement that there is currently a lack of connection between the district's vision and mission to the creation of goals to remain focused on student achievement. So we have to remind ourselves, right, that the district has its district goals annually set that the board approves, that the superintendent will be held accountable to completing. That's how you actually govern to say whether the district is well run or not. So directly from the evaluation, it was noted by you as a team, this is your work, saying that B, considers the vision, mission, and goals as the guiding force for district operations and the board's planning, oversight, and policy decisions is an area that is you're recognizing as an area in need of improvement. And also from that evaluation, ensures the vision, mission, and goals are clearly articulated to all district stakeholders and progress updates are communicated. So we have a process part here, right, that you're pointing out could be improved. So the challenge and opportunity that I see is really that you may want to consider, and I will say, when I needed the mission statement, it's hard to find. It's not on your website. It's not on your documentation that the agenda, I don't believe, right? So it might be a good first step to just make sure that the mission and vision statements are there to really be something that you share, not only as a board, but with the administrators and teachers in the district and your community at large, right? So you're keeping that focus on where it really is, and then focus your attention as a governing body on how you're going to support that, right? You should consider, how the decisions, the planning, the goal setting that you're doing, how you evaluate those things before you as a body really bring you closer to meeting those aspirational goals. And you should be identifying annually, board goals should be identified annually that are aligned with this mission and vision statement. And good news is that's where we're seeking to start that, to do that tonight, right? So any questions on that first part or comment? And we'll go through it, and then we're going to look at the next phase of how we use this information to move into board goals. Yep. Oh, okay.
So, the first time I think that we did board goals was like last year, and that was like a year process leading to us actually getting the board goals. And then they were in place for a full year last year and coming into this year. So I feel like, we're about to start this process from scratch again, yet we do have board goals, and unless our mission statement also changed, that we really didn't execute on.
That's a
That came
very
out of
valid
that. So
point.
do we have to go through another lengthy process?
Well, I think that what we're looking to do is use the board's input that you gave, your own self-evaluation, to just look at where you think. But to your point, no, you don't have to necessarily say, oh, we have to create new goals based on this. It might be a continuation of, well, we made it so far on that goal, but we didn't really complete that. We want to carry it forward. That would be totally acceptable. Yeah. Okay. And I'm sorry, you had.
I don't want to skip over the first metric. I don't want to skip over the first metric. 7 of 8, getting an 87% completion rate by board members. How does that weigh against the other districts that you do this with?
I hate making gross generalizations, right? But I will say this, that for this process, we would always want 8 of 8, right? But having done it is also a huge step in the right direction. We have to start somewhere, so things aren't always perfect. But I would encourage board members to realize that this is really your opportunity to weigh in on how you want to go forward as a team, right? So to be clear, I'm not coming in and telling you based on what I'm reading, these are your goals, right? I'm saying that this is really something that lends itself to an examination by you as a team, but also to help you set proper goals and to also inform your community that you're holding yourself accountable. Because once you set those goals, I'm not sure if in the past you actually had action plans tied to those goals. I'm not sure if you had updated reporting, perhaps quarterly, on progress being made towards those goals. So these are things that this process that we're embarking on now is meant to do.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one, which is policy, came in at 2.3 on a 4.0 scale. From the evaluation itself, our board governs through policies that reflect local values, principles, and guides the direction and priorities of the district. Notes that I'm just giving you are that the board indicates proficiency in the subcategory of reviews, updates, and adopts policies, procedures, and bylaws annually or as required. Comments reflect the commitment to maintaining the policy manual. And that's very good to hear, right? Because you're a policymaking body, and how you communicate what you expect to see from administration or how the district will be run, that's how you communicate that, is through your board policies. The challenge and opportunity that's there is that also, so two things can be true, right? It can be that people are focused on the importance of having policies, but the devil is often in the details, right? So based upon the comments, the charge of the policy committee should be restated to include the purpose of policies to guide the district. I'm not sure from the comments in that area that everyone was really clear on what the intent is, right? So as an educational thing, so everyone's on the same page, starting from the same point. Also going into the process by which the policy committee operates, including how items appear on the policy committee agenda for review, right? Just, there may be some of you that are clear on that and some of you that aren't. So it's always really important to firm up that communication. And also how recommendations are made to the full board. This really goes for any committee structure, but we're specifically looking at policy here, right? So we don't vote out of committee, but we make recommendations, part of building that, that sense of confidence among the board members that even if you weren't in the room for that discussion, that you're getting enough information, not dissimilar to the previous presentation on HIB, that you feel confident that you can support recommendations, right? Or ask informed questions. Still with me so far? Okay. 3, accountability for student achievement, 2.3. From the evaluation, the statement is, our board supports a rigorous and coherent system of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and prioritizes continuous growth for each student's academic success and well-being. So the note was that the board indicates that there's a shared commitment to student achievement and positive student outcomes. And from the work that I've done with you as a team, I see that to be true, that, you know, that's really what brings you to the table, that you really want to be playing your part in ensuring that there's opportunities for growth for students and good outcomes for students. The opportunity here is remaining focused on serving student achievement through the use of objective data in decision-making and planning to remain effective and efficient in serving students. So when we look at accountability for student achievement on a very high level, a lack of good process and structure is inefficient and takes away from student outcomes and what you'll be able to effectively do to support students, right? So we want really good processes in place that help you govern and stay at that balcony level view to ensure that the administration can run efficiently and everyone shares in the part they play in being focused on student achievement. The board identifies the following as areas of growth.
We
Oh,
have a
sorry,
question.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yes, Ms. Shaw.
So this is the one in the survey that I really struggled with because as a board member, I don't really feel like I have, you know, we have our curriculum committee we listen to the administration, we have the conversation. But for the most part, we are, taking what the administration is recommending, right? And we are supporting that through voting yes on our agenda. But, but we don't interview the teachers. And so when we say that or like do so many things that are in the weeds that, are left to the administration to do. And so then to say that we're accountable, for something that we have, I feel like other than saying yes at a board meeting to support what the administration puts on the agenda, it feels a little disconnected for me,
Sure.
right?
And I think the part of that is understanding, really the board's role of governance is to see that the district is well run. How do you do that? By ensuring that you have policies that speak to how the administration will manage it, right? By ensuring that there's process of what data you're given, right? At certain times of the year, we don't generally start, in September with student reporting because there's nothing to report at that point. But having a clear understanding and working with superintendent to know, when should we expect certain data to be coming in and using that, right?
Right, but I guess like we don't have any power to action the data, right? And so, for example, we had NJSLA results recently, and there were some areas that, showed a decline, right? And now I'm like, so our processes are in place. They are, allowing the administration to do what they need to do. I feel like we, never really prevent them from doing anything that they choose to. And yet our numbers are down. So now, now we're accountable for that. It doesn't sit right.
Okay. I agree with that. Okay, so let's go a little bit into this further so that we can come back and have these discussions on what may bring some clarity to that, okay? So the board, just to back up a moment though, is the governing body that is here not to run the schools, right? I think we agree on that, but to see they're well run. So I think what this is seeking to do through the evaluation is really to help guide you on where you're finding yourself. So finding yourself confused there is fine, right? What we want to do is now address how we bring some clarity to that so that the board is really functioning and feeling that confidence in governing without getting into administration.
Right. So I don't think I'm confused. I just don't think that the way this reads is necessarily appropriate, right? I know what my role is, right? I'm not an educator, so I'm going to listen to the administration and, I'll ask questions and I'll debate, right? But I will support what they want to do. But again, but because I'm not an educator, right? And, what am I, being held accountable for student achievement when we do support the administration, again, doesn't
Okay.
like per whatever guidelines that the NJSBA is setting forth, right?
I
No,
think,
well,
I
just
think.
to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
To address that, this is a tool that you engaged in that is based on what the roles and responsibilities of board governance are, right? So if we look further, I'm not going to forget you, okay? The board identifies the following areas for growth, and this is under accountability for student achievement. And it talked about reviews our student data with attention given to subgroup achievement to ensure success of all students. That's a specific of what you would do towards student achievement. Provides for essential learning tools, including rigorous curriculum and technology, ensures fair and equitable additional opportunities are available to all students, and recognizes high levels of staff and student achievement. So these came in by the board, your own evaluation, saying that these are areas that you would like to improve upon. And these areas fall under accountability for student achievement. So if you are taking steps to improve those things that are here, then you'll be making those steps towards ensuring your accountability as a board. So that's really why we're looking at this. We can look at, I'm sorry, you.
Yeah, I just want to say that it's been something that recently I've struggled with myself.
Okay.
And this is no way in shape or form specific to anyone per se. I just think that it's very difficult for us to be held accountable when there's really nothing we can do. We're really at the mercy of of what the district decides. And all we do are basically advocate for something. But like if we see there's a direction that's happening in a particular department, a teaching style or whatever, and the public could be coming to us and complaining about it, there's really nothing we can do other than bring it to
Well,
the
no,
attention of the district.
Right, we know through the code of ethics that you can't solve that problem, right?
Right.
That belongs.
So how are we accountable?
Evaluation. So clearly what I pointed out was these were from the evaluation that the board itself has identified as areas of growth. So looking at, C, D, E, and G, which I just went through, listed here, is if you strengthen that, you will be growing in that direction of governance to know that you're playing your part in it. That is not the same as, directing changes in administration or, solving the questions for people who approach you, but to just be governing as a board, right? We also need to understand that the board retains the authority, not individual members of the board, right?
Mhm.
So what we're just looking at is your self-evaluation, what information comes from it, and then we're going to have a discussion on how that can help you kind of set what goals, what areas do we want to, focus our attention on, and pick 3 goals maybe for the upcoming year, and they might be carryovers from last year, right? Of what you value as the areas for your focus in your governance, right? Because when there's good, strong governance, then you'll be in fact fulfilling your accountability for the part you play in student achievement, okay? So if we look at the next area, governance, team, relationship, and accountability, it came in at 1.8 on a 4.0 scale. And from the evaluation, it said, our board understands that healthy, productive relationships among members of the board and between the superintendent and the board are essential to providing effective leadership and prioritizing student success. So I noted that the board notes the completion of the superintendent evaluation on time as a positive. That I believe was a challenge in years past. The board comments note a lack of respect for the committee structure, right? So this is your words. Lack of preparedness and a lack of respect for the board majority. And additionally, 7 board responses evaluated the following, and this was a subcategory in that section, as unsatisfactory. Which said works together as a team in an atmosphere of trust and respect. So that's pretty telling when 7 members of the board are saying that you don't feel that that's happening, right? So it's hard to govern well in an environment where people aren't feeling comfortable and trusting in the team. So a challenge opportunity is to identify areas of growth, understands and complementary roles as board members and the superintendent, confining board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, having clear communication process with the superintendent and with one another, adopting explicit goals for the board distinct from the district goals and holds itself accountable for their accomplishment, annually evaluates its governance performance and ability to work as a team with focus on student achievement, and takes collective responsibility for board performance and comes to meetings prepared to discuss and add value to the decision-making process. So it's crucial, right, to build up the board team. Part of addressing anything is being able to see the issue. So you have spoken clearly and honestly about the challenges you're feeling as individuals on this team, and some attention should probably be given to these areas of what do we do next to improve that, right? Because it's hard to be effective if the team itself can't effectively work together. Resource management and oversight came in at 2.5. The board, from the evaluation, the statement is our board is responsible, ethical, and accountable stewards of the district's monetary and non-monetary resources. The board recognizes strengths in this area to include vigilance in fiscal resource management and oversight, including through the budget process. Challenge opportunity areas were noted. The board, when looking at the board comments, it reflects a need for clarity in the board's oversight role in finance to include the use of your policies to outline the steps of the budget process, approving monthly secretary and treasurer's reports, and receiving audit reports and updates on corrective action plans, right? So clearly the board is not the business administrator, right, or administration, but by having, speaking through the policy of what the budget process looks like, right, ensuring that those steps are being followed, ensuring that all board members are aware of the importance of understanding the monthly reports and approving those reports, making sure things balance on a regular basis. And, you know, having independent auditor come in and report to you if there's any corrective action plan, to make sure that that plan is being worked through the administration so that progress is being made and adjustments are being made, right? That is governance, to make sure that the district is moving forward positively. In community leadership, it came in at 2.3. The board and it says the board recognizes public education's impact on the community and understands how strong connections mean everyone is invested in successful schools. So your comments reflect a need to improve ways to positively engage with the community and build and maintain that trust around issues focused on student achievement, right? When we only interact with the community through board meetings, and maybe you're not, right? You may be doing other things. New administration now in place is a great opportunity to develop other ways of engaging with the public and keeping them, you know, understanding what all the good work that's happening in the district and where the goals are and the accomplishments being made. Right now, I can recognize that the strategic plan is in place, and that in and of itself is a very important way to engage with your community. And part of that process is, you know, regular updates as things move forward over the next 5 years so that the community is kept aware of the progress made under the strategic plan. So when we look further, what do you consider the board's greatest strengths that we can build from? These were your comments. Board members are interested in student achievement. The board wants policies to support students and staff growth and well-being. There is diversity of opinion on the board, which was seen as a strength. Board members are interested in building positive relationships with the new administration, and board members want to learn more about the budget development process to support student achievement. So importantly, you know, you're reflecting on the fact that you understand that plans are goals, district goals are in place, plans are set, but that the budget has to reflect, right, and tie that in to ensure that things will move forward positively. Governance areas that you identified as needing focus or further work to be an effective board team are building and maintaining trust to support healthy interactions among the governance team and with the community, developing more efficient and effective communication procedures to keep the board members informed and improve overall effectiveness, which best serves students, deepen understanding of your bylaws and rules of order to make meetings more efficient in service to students and maintain community engagement, identify efficiencies in the committee structure, and board training to support governance roles and support informed decision-making, right? So you did a very, you know, reflective look at where you feel you are and where you would hope to be. And now as we look at that, I will say on the back page, the last sheet has, I just really took the image of this from your compilation. Again, all the raw data will be given to you. This is a summary. I think your raw data came in at about 18,
Yes,
18 to
It came
20
in
pages.
and it has to go to our board attorney
Yes,
so that's
for
where,
review. Yes, but it comes in at about 18 to, and that's a natural step. We need to make sure that there's nothing in your board self-evaluation that are comments that could be considered evaluative of staff. If things are evaluative of staff, they need to be redacted because the board self-evaluation is not a protected document. So to ensure that there's no liability to you as a governing team, we just recommend that step, but you'll have access to that raw data. But you know, what I've attempted to do here is really just take somewhere between 18 and 20 pages and bring it down to this so we can have somewhere to start the conversation tonight. So this is a snapshot of the grid And this one part speaks about your individual contributions to the board team. And the reason that I put it here is it's really helpful to keep this in front of you, right, throughout the year, to just, make sure that you're refocusing your attention on these are the responsibilities that you really have as individuals as part of this team, okay? Not surprisingly, I see in all of my boards virtually that if you look at the average score for individuals, it comes in higher than the team score, right? And I will say that the math isn't mathing there, because if everyone individually was really at a higher level, then the board would be seen as would be evaluated at a higher level, right? So it's a very human thing to think that we are doing things well and it's someone else that's not. What I'm asking you to do is just be reflective of the feedback that you gave yourselves as a team to see, how do you use this? How do we use this to go forward, right? So I know that you were, when I was saying about having district goals and action plans, that you were like, no, we didn't really have them last time. Is that correct?
No, it wasn't with respect to district goals. I was talking
Board
about
goals, board-
board
Right.
goals,
Yeah.
right? That we didn't have.
We have the board goals, and I resent them to you just a few minutes ago.
No, I know we have them. I don't recall us having any specific action steps.
It's included in there.
Well, if they are, we never
But
really.
it's true, we did not review them regularly because we
did not
didn't have a
review them reg-
president.
and-
We lost our president. Yes.
So 1 second,
Yes.
we did not only did we not review them, but we didn't have any sort of like formal formal following of the action plan, if
Yeah.
you will, right? So it's not that we were, doing these steps and just not reporting out on them. We just didn't do anything.
And to be fair, right, this has been a big year for Berkeley Heights. You had a change in administration, right, with brought in a new superintendent. That was a big process for you to undertake. It's not necessarily a terrible thing to say that, right? What we want to do, it's not about being wrong, it's about being better, right? So looking at those goals, but also knowing that now the next step, right? You had goals before and action plans. There were perhaps reasons why you moved away from really focusing on those. I will say that board goals and action plans are really meant to keep the board focused on its governance, not just when you're writing the goals, but through the year, right? So that you're really changing and improving as you go. So on the next sheet, we have a sample. Did these get distributed? We have a sample worksheet, okay, for board goals. And this is actually just a sample of how you'd write a goal on the top and then break it out into the steps. And part of this is to address what your major activities are, who's involved, the resources, the time, and indicators of success, right? What we really want is to add a layer of objectivity on here. So we want to start out just the way you would with your district goals with the superintendent to say, well, how are we going to know we actually met the goal? We don't want to be at the end of the year all disagreeing with, I think we did it and I think we didn't, right? And then people disagreeing. Well, we want to say, this is what the goal is. This is how we're going to know that we've achieved it. And we want to put that down from the beginning. So if you flip over that sheet, I just want to draw your attention to it's filled out with a sample goal. Now, this is only a sample. I think you're feeling confident that the superintendent evaluation, that was a goal and that you moved forward and did that in a timely way. But it's just talking about that as a sample to say, if the board goal was to evaluate the superintendent in a timely manner, right? Very brief statement. What are we trying to do? What's our goal? The major activities are broken out there. Setting your annual goals. Board sets date for each step of the process, right? When will the superintendent have her self-evaluation done for the superintendent's evaluation? Then setting those dates for when the board is expected to complete their part, the date where the board comes together to discuss the findings and find the majority opinion, the date that you're going to meet and deliver it and discuss it with the superintendent. Those are action steps. The next would be evaluating based on progress towards goals and the evaluation itself, right? That's what you need to do. and submitting the written performance report to the superintendent. So all, those are samples of the steps in that process for board goals. So looking at now trying to come up with, say, 3 goals and developing action plans, if you look at what's in front of you, it might be helpful to consider sample goals, right? And I'm just, these are just samples that I've come up with based on what you reported. Vision, mission, and goals under that section. A possible goal could be align the work of the board with the aspirations of the mission statement, the objective being to bring focus and clarity to the board's governance. If that was your goal, we would talk about what action steps can you take and fill out the grid so that you would be able to hold yourself accountable to making progress towards that goal. Okay? Under policy, a possible goal could be to bring clarity and efficiency to the policy review and approval to support district operations. An objective would be that policies should guide administration and not seek to administer the schools, right? Your policies shouldn't be usurping the authority that belongs with the administration, but clarifies what you're expecting to happen in the running of the district, right? Accountability for student achievement. A possible goal could be to effectively serve students through the use of objective data in decision-making and planning, the objective being to ensure the district is well-run. So these are just sample statements of what a goal would be. So now it's up to you. So at this point, what is a goal, right? Either from here or something else that you want to carry over from last year that you think is a goal that is worth focusing your attention on based on your own self-evaluation of where you're seeing, opportunities for growth.
Well,
Yeah.
so I
This is a-
apologize.
Yes, I
do
just,
need to
right.
leave.
We have a issue where Mrs. Stanley has to leave in a few minutes at 8 o'clock. So that means we will not have a board quorum. So we will have to adjourn the meeting at that time before Mrs. Stanley leaves.
I would suggest
Mhm.
that you can consider if you want to get started on this. You don't have to vote on anything tonight, right? This is not the end of it. It's to kind of maybe come up with one that gets us started and the board can work through this process and then outside of this meeting and then come back and officially, take up what the board goals for the year.
So I think the attorney said that, right, if, when I excuse myself,
Mhm.
that you would have to adjourn the meeting, but that you could continue on as if it was a committee meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know, can we continue to tape it? As I think that would be
I don't think
beneficial.
so.
No?
No, I don't think Mr. Gisler said that because we would have 4 members here to continue. It's not a quorum.
We don't tape
Yeah.
committee meetings.
No,
Yeah.
we don't, right. That's not
So,
right.
I have to defer to your
Mhm.
attorney
Yeah, okay.
and policy.
So I apologize. I wish we had enough people for a quorum, but I have 13 girls who look up to me and I don't want to. But before I go, I just want to quickly say that I'm really glad that we did the evaluation. And I think everyone was really genuinely honest in it. And I think that's great. I think one of my things that stood out looking at your data was definitely committee structure
Mhm.
and using it wisely. Right? Because everyone's time is valuable and like, really making sure these committee structures, like people understand why we have committees, how they work, which committee does what, I think is really important. And I know we're already working on that a little bit in policy and trying to change our committees. But I think if we make that a goal, it would be great. I love the idea of a board handbook. Really having something down, written down, like this is what you should do. This is how we communicate, I think would be great. So I love that suggestion. And then I think, right, like we've kind of discussed having a governance committee and maybe putting something on there on how that would work if we do move forward with that. If you guys kind of discuss that and how to, if we do want to move forward, because I think, right, governance is kind of what we're missing in a lot of this. So
Mrs. Cleary, could you give us an explanation of a governance committee?
Yeah, your governance committee it really is the intention of what you want it to be, right? So if I can say that a number of my districts don't necessarily have a separate committee. One of the things I would caution you about is creating more layers, right? What I really stress is for you to have process that really supports the work that you're doing, that makes you operate efficiently, to support the district operating efficiently. More nights out, longer meetings, right, aren't necessarily serving students. So a governance committee is sometimes used to help formulate the creation of a handbook. You may not have to have it as, you know, a standing committee, but it could be an ad hoc committee that comes together to kind of be focused on a very specific task of creating a handbook that would help guide you in how you actually interact with one another as a board. And then that would be the basis for onboarding new members as well, right? Because you might want to add some, you know, welcome to the board type things for an onboarding manual, but it's basically the handbook that you would have. And it would bring some stability to everyone understanding, you know, how do I get my questions answered if something comes out of committee, so that it's not just being put on the board agenda or being spoken about at a board meeting, right? With the focus of really trying to find efficiencies in how you work together.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I have to be there by 8, so I'm just going to make a motion to end the meeting.
Okay, yeah, do we need to have a motion to create an ad hoc committee to work on these board goals and then work on the manual? Or when are we going to meet again to work on these?
I think an ad hoc committee is a good idea.
So wait, Pam, you made a motion to end. the
Just
thing.
end the official board meeting.
If I'm a-
I do think you can continue as a committee. I think that would be,
Right, so Gail, that wasn't the motion. The
No,
mo-
that was not the motion. She
No,
was just
so
making
then,
a
so Pam is
suggestion.
making a motion, I second.
Oh,
um,
well, she talked about her timeline. She's asked a few minutes earlier. So
Right.
we're talking now, before an official motion was made, do we need to create an ad hoc committee for this process with
If
the board?
if I might interrupt just
Yes.
for a moment, which might be helpful, I hope. I believe you're making a motion to close the meeting.
Yes.
We're going to continue the discussions about goal setting and the ad hoc committee after the meeting is closed, and we continue on as if it's a committee meeting. Was
Yeah.
that your intent?
yeah, can
Is that the
we,
understanding?
Right, so I second it because she
Yeah.
put the motion on, right?
Okay.
And I second it,
I just want to close the
Yeah,
public meeting because we don't have a quorum.
right.
Okay, so we have Mrs. Stanley made the motion. We have a second by Mrs. Jolly. Voice vote?
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I wasted and came with my time. And to find when we get here that we are going to be under these circumstances to not finish the day is upsetting to me. I hope that you guys weren't aware that we were going to run into this situation. And we owe it to the rest of us to have the respect to at least alert when there's not going to be enough people here.
I did receive an email, a text from Mrs. Khanna today that she was not going to be able to attend due to conflict. And I did receive a call from Mrs. Stanley that she had to leave early. I had no communication from Mrs.
Look,
Akiri.
positive
or
intent
Mr.
that this was a coincidence, right? I just think I'm not going to object to meeting. I'm here to do business. I'm saying, no, I don't want to stop the meeting.
Just to be clear, I'm able to continue on with you with
I-
the,
I-
is that the issue?
I understand that.
Okay.
The work we're doing is not meaningful work with only half the board here.
Yeah.
Right, the scores themselves show that we have a problem working together and a problem with communication, a problem with attendance and everything else. So with us doing it here without a full group, we're not making progress. We're spinning our wheels.
Yeah.
I do think that there could be a benefit, and it's for you to decide, not for me. I can stay, or we can end it and I can leave. But there is a benefit to moving forward, to at least framing out what will happen about the board goals, right? To taking that step forward towards putting something down. I'm not sure about calling another special meeting. I know there's been some negativity around special meetings and the need to have another special meeting.
So I don't mean to make you stay.
I know
But
what you're saying.
But I cannot agree to us agreeing to end the meeting. I'd rather abruptly end as you walk out and then be what it is, right? I'm not asking you to stay.
I
If I
know.
was in your shoes, I'd do the same exact thing.
That's what I mean is we're a board of 8, right? And I can't hold my girls accountable because people don't show up, right?
Please
And
let my
I know,
comments keep you.
I know.
Yeah.
And I agree, I understand, I completely agree, right? Like,
But I gotta be on record saying I'm against this.
yeah, I
Any
agree.
other suggestions?
You have a motion on the floor. You need to vote.
Yes, we had the voice vote, and Madam Secretary, we had 3 assents and 1 dissent. Yes, I said.
The meeting ends.
Thank you guys for showing up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Before we're adjourned.
4 yes, 1 no.
For
For
approve of going on, continue, ending the public session.
ending the public session.
Okay,
yes.
and then continuing on.
This is the time here.
Okay,
This is a joke.
okay.
I don't know if they're continuing.
Not that we disagree,
No, I,
what you say.
yeah, I get it.
And again,
I'm willing to invest the time, but
Mhm.
if it's gonna fall on deaf ears and we're just doing the work for it to then be rejected and not have a meaningful debate, then why, we're gonna have to redo it. I'll listen. Well, it doesn't matter if I'm here or not. We're officially
gonna-
out, right?
I mean, I'll be honest with
okay,
you.
so we're adjourned at 7:58.
So